Hey, it's Stu, and this is a reading wrap up. I normally don't do them on Saturday mornings, which it is right now, because a lot of the reading that I do that's not commute, sort of listening or just before bed, or on a small break, kind of get in whatever reading is on the weekends. However, I'm going into like this week of break where I'm not working, I'm not hosting, and I'm not traveling. So this weekend actually feels really hectic compared to the next week, when really my big plans are to read. Um, and I want to unhaul one of these books to someone that I promised. We were supposed to do a book exchange, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about the book. I am a really moody reader right now, and I think it's the winter vibes, and I think it's also that December didn't really have like even piles of possibilities. It just was kind of a confluence of cleaning up things, getting the 10 till the end done, reading stuff that I had kind of impulsively put on hold and expected to be on hold for a long time, and either got off hold quicker or a long time isn't now, etc., etc. And so I felt really moody about my reading, meaning I was like either fully engulfed and engaged and enthralled, or I was almost annoyed if I wasn't having a fantastic reading experience. And normally I can hang out, I can even accept that I'm not fully engaged in a book, but let's just see what it has to offer. I have very few DNFs, and it's not because like I don't like not finishing things, albeit that is true. It's more like I mean, in many cases, unless I'm incredibly distracted by something such as overt sexism, a trigger that I can't handle, or just terrible writing, I can try to, figure out the virtue of the book and see it for that. Every book offers um, insights into a way of thinking that um, that isn't offered through other medium. I will get into the books, and I think that was just a preface a bit about what this book review is going to look like. It might feel a little bit bristlier, or yeah, just that might show up in how I'm going to review these books, especially this first one. That's Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. So this is the book that I'm going to unhaul today. There's a bookshop open only every second Saturday, and it's usually run by volunteers because it's a Friends of the Library situation. And the 1 month ago, the one second Saturday ago in December, the person who was volunteering said that they had just found good dirt, and I said, "Oh, how exciting! I just found Black Cake like that week before," and they asked me, "Oh, do you want me to give you good dirt? I mean, I volunteer here. I had quicker access than you did," and I said, "No, no, no, no. I'll read Black Cake, and then I'll bring it back. And if you're done with good dirt, we can exchange it, or, we can exchange that way." So I did this via audio. And where I really respect the heart and intention of this book, the delivery is pedestrian at best, and that seems harsh. Again, I fully understand and embrace the heart of this book. It was, first of all, the audio maybe also in itself didn't work for me, but there's so many issues that I can take with the delivery, the actual delivery of this book on almost every level, that that I almost felt frustrated. No, I didn't almost. I felt frustrated with it. Again, that's kind of my moodiness. And it was really hard for me. Like, I wanted to like it so much, and I didn't like it so much that it actually created conflict in me. The, like, literary devices used are so resemblant of sort of like TV drama that they felt trite and cliche. The character development through multiple characters was sparse or non-existent. Up until the point the two main characters, which are the brother and sister, I didn't even like them. I wanted them to grow in a way that was meaningful, and they didn't. They were self-absorbed and non-reflective, and the way that they were processing these issues, I wanted and needed more because this author was attempting to do things. I personally like the first third of the book when we were on the island and meeting who is to be the narrator kind of the main story. And she's, falling in love and interacting with her father. That was interesting. And I feel like if it would have just stuck to that thread and not tried to do all of these other things, which it didn't do well, and also with so many plot holes that I had to just suspend disbelief all of the time, then I would have actually really liked this book. However, it did all of those things, and I kept convincing myself to give it more of a chance because I did like that one section. And in fact, I did not. I didn't. So, that, you know, this is a very popular book on Goodreads. If you look it up, it's got a 4 or something, which is an extraordinary high. And that should have given me a hint. I'm normally, if it's a really popular book, it isn't necessary for me because of that what I said before, like when the literary devices are really resemblant to like film or TV drama kind of thing, that doesn't work for me. That's not what I need out of literature. And I don't like it. I don't watch TV drama either. I don't like it even there, but that's just me. And like everyone knows that reading is very personal. And so I understand that a lot of people liked this book. I also think that this story wanted to be told, and I can appreciate that. I do think that the author tried to shove sort of like contemporary issues into snippets of characters' lives, and that's what it felt like instead of actually authentic experiences. Unlike, like, for instance, The Hate U Give, which felt like that author, Angela Thomas, knew her audience, and she knew who she was writing to, and she knew why she was developing the story the way she did. This felt like more like I'm writing for a really broad audience, and I want to cover all of these issues that are relevant today and just kind of shove them in on characters, and then not actually manage to write the setting or the characters very well. That's enough said. I don't need to like continue to be negative about this book. It didn't work. I'm happy to pass it along because it is a popular book. I am willing to give Good Dirt a try. However, if they don't have it today, I'm just going to tell them, forget about it. If I find it in a like little free library situation, maybe I'll take it. But I'm going to need some convincing when I have so many other books that I'm really looking forward to reading, even ones that are quite experimental on my shelves. The book that I hauled at that bookshop to kind of partner read with Black Cake was Baking Cakes in Kigali. And I thought, just because of the word cake, and cake being sort of like a central piece of a symbolism that brings humans together, could be interesting to read together. I got maybe 3 chapters in, and I found myself really wanting to get to know Kigali. As setting is just really what I'm exploring deeply these days. And I didn't find it authentic. It felt like this author had spent time there, but wasn't from there. That's what it felt like to me. Having never been there, what do I know? But that's what I felt like. I felt that this author was writing characters that she was writing from a view that didn't feel incredibly authentic. It again felt a bit forced. I read the author's as I was like having these experiences, I decided to try to find out more about this author. It did spark that curiosity. So at the back of the book, there's like interview with the author, and she explains that she really wanted to just show Kigali after the Rwandan genocide as a place where people have lives and thrive and, make families and choices. And And I really, again, I'm for that aim. I after not really enjoying Black Cake, I didn't have any um let me see, stamina to actually try to pretend or stick with a book or try to find what's good about it when it wasn't working right off. So what I did do was switch to this book, which is Skyscraper by Benjamin Wood. And I listened to a couple of YouTube book reviewers talk about this book, who's the way that they, talk about books really works for me, and it got me pretty enthusiastic about it. I was reading Bookers when I put this on hold as well, because this was long listed and didn't make the short list for this year's Booker. It's got a blurb by Douglas Stewart, the author of Shuggie Bain, who did win the Booker. And I really, really enjoyed this book. This book is like the definition of atmospheric, and the definition of like really slowing down and getting to know the setting for what it is. And then because the setting is unique in a lot of ways, and even the main character who is he scrapes the sea for his name is Thomas, and he goes out onto the sea with his little horse and scrapes it for shrimp, and it's dangerous and it's dark and it's lonely, and he's barely etching out a living, and it's the time between the wars in western England. And I just feel like this author, there are very few characters and they are developed so well, and the setting is done so well, and this sort of slice of life that also emanates this ultimate sort of human theme, which is hopes and dreams, um and how we make meaning and out of our lives and continue to do the mundane, well, picturing ourselves and dreaming of more. Um, I thought that it did just such a spectacular job. I recommend this book to so many kinds of readers. Of course, not someone who likes, fast-paced, pacey books, because this is not that, but anyone who likes setting, atmospheric, character. And I thought in a lot of ways, there's a lot of tension in this book. And I found that interesting because I've been reading books that are using kind of the suspense literary devices and tropes in stories, and I thought this was quite suspenseful too. There's even mystery in it, and I felt, unlike being, yeah, I know what's happening, I felt myself really wanting to know how the author was going to resolve some of these, mysteries in the book. So yeah, I thank anyone who talked about this book in a way that worked for me, because it did. And I'm really happy to have read it. I got that from the library. That's why you saw it on my Libby app. Because of the slow moving, atmospheric, small town plot setting, even sort of talking about the impact of war without like making the war its main focus, I was able to then get into with like new eyes and enthusiasm Esther Kinsey's Seeing Further. Seeing Further is sort of an auto fiction, historical fiction, memoir type book, set in a small town on the Hungarian-Romanian border. And if you know anything about the history of that part of the world, it's really hard to not talk about that part of the world without knowing about occupations and who and how big forces were occupying these territories, and people of villages and small spaces were impacted in multiple different ways throughout a long history. And I think um, in the same way. In fact, there are some parts, like for instance, film, like cinema, even in Sea Scraper, shows up as an escapism, in a way to cultivate dreams, in a way to bring people together. And this book really, really deeply explores that. There were some parts of it that it wasn't my jam, you know. But when I got back into it, the author, Esther Kinsey, is a published poet, so her prose, even the memoir, is quite poetic. I'm not a memoir galley. It's not my memoir era. I think that's what I have to say. I'm not in a memoir era. There have been times when I really like memoir was for me, and it's just not right now. So I think that's part of the reason. Like, I read some of it. I found myself really forcing this book, and then I put it aside and I said, you know what? I'm just gonna, it wasn't even a softie enough. It was just literally like, I'll set it aside and I'll get back to it. And then I never did, and I didn't for about over a month. So it was kind of sitting around saying to me, you know, go ahead and get on Haul, because you have so many things to read. This came from a little free library, and it's in IRB. It's an ARC as well. Give it up, because you know, somebody out there, this is going to be the book for them. I'm really glad. It really does matter when you read books that complement each other, because I was able to finish this after Sea Scraper, holding together, like making connections between the themes of the two books, really, really, you know, finding the setting endearing, really even experiencing some of these pictures in a different way than I had been able to. And I was able to finish this book, and where I wouldn't probably ever read it again. I'm not even curious to read it again, even though I feel like if I were even in a better mood, mood for it, it could be even better. I'm glad that I got to finish it. Okay, so I think it's worth noting that through all this time, I've been reading Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses. It was dense, and I think I already said in a reading review last week, so I have not finished it. However, I'm now 2/3, if not 3/4 of the way done. I think the last part of this book isn't part of the novel. Absolutely, it started to feel incredibly forced, and I might have to just say it's okay to end there. And there's parts of this experience that I so deeply appreciate. I become so intrigued and so enthralled, and then all of a sudden, and that maybe is part of the purpose of this book, I am thrown out and I'm lost and confused or annoyed. And because I'm so moody right now, like I can't work through that. It just is too frustrating for me. And so I'm just set it down and then, you know, say, because he's so, you know, because this story's so vast in all of its ways, because it's telling all these little stories, it's a frame, plot structure. And because he's just, you know, really, really addressing theme after theme, I am able to kind of connect with it through different connections. And I think it's been useful for that. I don't know. I don't know if it'll be like the Esther Kinsey, that I'll just keep the bookmark in and, you know, make a little bit of progress and have it around forever, or if I'll just say, you know what, it's okay, Salman Rushdie, Satanic Verses. I have 4 or 5 other Salman Rushdies that I might actually enjoy more, and I don't need to commit myself to every book, even if parts of it I really, really like. The reason that I brought that up is because I may or may, if I unhaul it, then I won't probably talk about it again, but it was useful also in connective thinking around The Wonder by Emma Donoghue, as was Sea Scraper. So let me explain that, that this is also set in a really atmospheric small town. It's earlier. The main character, who goes by Lib, is Nightingale. So she trained under Florence Nightingale, which was the Crimean Wars. So that's the period it's set in, quite early. And this book is tense and fraught and really a commentary on religion. Yeah. And it's done in a way that is not atypical actually of Irish literature or several Irish authors and works that I have read. But it really, really, really works. And I think, because this absolutely one of its main purposes is to have a dialogue about religion and what it does and where it can be harmful. Maybe not religion itself, but the way in which it's utilized by humans in structures of power and privilege, and or through sort of zeal and ignorance, if one might say that. There's a lot of like conversation between science and belief in this book. There's a lot of conversation about the English and Irish. It's definitely exploring the famine. And in fact, the little girl in this story is fasting. So that was a very deliberate and interesting choice of Emma Donoghue as a country experienced because of economic oppression. Because of oppression, it like many people lost their lives due to starvation. And it absolutely looks at women and how they're treated and the roles of women in society, the power that they have, high and low, or how they find themselves able to find power in a system that disenfranchises them completely. And I have read Room, and I would say they're completely different books. Like, if you would have like just not known the author, you wouldn't, I don't think, be able to say, oh, the same author of these two books. I find that fascinating about Emma Donoghue's work. I think I like this better than Room, although Room was such an endeavor. And the sort of theme in my mind that connects both is this children in extreme circumstances, being their innocent selves and taking in the world and interpreting it through child's eyes, and how in extreme ways, in both cases, the adult world or the real world infringes on the innocence of children. I would absolutely recommend this book to anyone who likes Irish literature, to anyone who likes to explore female issues. There's a lot of tension. This also, like, it has plot twists the way that a suspense novel does. And I find that I actually really like literary suspense. I just find sort of like the commercial suspense doesn't necessarily do it for me, but I'm really, this is the several, like, I've read several books this month where literary suspense was used. I think this does this extremely well, and I really liked this novel. I feel like I'm going to be thinking about it for a long time after. The other novel that I just finished was The Snow Child, and that was an audio by Ewan Ivey. Also came on recommendation. I put it on hold thinking it'll be a good winter book. I didn't I didn't know that much about it going in, but it does have elements of magic realism. It takes place in like homesteading Alaska. I thought that the author did what she was trying to do very well in this book. I was really engaged. The mixing of the fairy tales and the myths of a snow girl, such as like Little Red Riding Hood or Snow White, in with how hard it is to survive in the wilderness, in with sort of like the romanticization of homesteading meets reality. I thought setting was done incredibly well. The characters were developed well, and I stayed engaged right until kind of the very end. I lost interest a little bit. Um, and I think that's just me. There might be some things that I mean, me as a reader might have wanted a little different about the ending, but I found the book to be a pretty spectacular read. And for that reason, I jumped in my sort of queue the For the Wolf by Hannah Whiten, because I think, again, comparing these wild forest, in this case it's like a world, so there's magic in the forest trees are dangerous, etc. In the Snow Girl, it uses magic realism, so the forest's real and the dangers of the forest are real, right? And here I mean, it's real to the characters, but this isn't a world. I think I could say the same thing, maybe I was saying about Black Cake, about this book, Hannah Whiten. I can just really feel the heart of this book, and the desire to write it. The writing is not Emma Donoghue or Benjamin Wood, but I so far have really been able to engage with this story, where I was worried that I wouldn't. It's high fantasy and some of the other things I just said, but because I just finished Snow Child, I have been able to kind of get myself into this book. It's a pacey book, and I think it's meant to be that. So I mean, I'm 100 pages in, and like one small sitting before bed, thinking, okay, what do I want to start? So that's what that's where I'm at. I've decided to unhaul without reading Charles DeLint, Someplace to Be Flying. I have a friend who was a Charles DeLint fan. He has a lot of Charles DeLint if I ever want to go back. I just too much fantasy and speculative coming together all at one time for me, who's not a fantasy and or even really speculative reader, although I like to sprinkle them in. Like, to have them all at one time won't work for me as moody as I'm reading right now. So I've decided to just let that go. We'll see what happens with this, and then I'll do a TBR maybe soon, maybe after the weekend, because the weekend's pretty hectic, and I'll do like really look at what I want to read for my one luscious week of no work, no travel, no hosting, just reading.